All right. This is one of the episodes that rarely gets mentioned later on in Star Trek, but the perspective of the episode is something so unique that, okay, it's not necessarily the only time we did this. They actually did stories like this more than once in The Next Generation as ways of looking at the whole logic of why the Federation doesn't um, normally open diplomatic contact with races that aren't already capable of interacting on a galactic scale. Not that any of the other races actually follow that, so, it's something a bit unique to the Federation. Ugh. Anyways, though, I mean, seriously, the Klingons would just enslave people that are pre-warp civilization and be like, ah, yes, more slave labor. Get to work. Anyway, though, so the basic premise here is that Riker is infiltrating a planet on Malcor. See, the Malcorians had been working on developing warp technology, and the Federation had been observing them closely enough to know this. And the crew of the Enterprise gets directed to make a preemptive assessment so that the Federation could properly react to this, because apparently the Malcorians are actually quite close to Federation space. So they're one of those worlds that the Federation leaves alone because they're too primitive and, you know, not someone that the Federation is willing to have open relations with, yet is someone that the Federation is kind of going around because it's, there. Anyway, so um see, the problem here of course is that um the locals are actually um advanced enough that they realize that Riker's a imposter and not who he claims to be, and they pretty much figure out that he's an extraterrestrial uh, Im- impersonating a Malcorian rather quickly. Now, then, of course, the rest of the episode is mostly just talking with a few of the Malcorians about, oh, what are we going to do in the future? Blah 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 blah. And then the Malcorians eventually decide that their race is not ready to join the galactic community and um, decide to shelve their project to build a warp capable space fleet. And that's a rather boring summary. It really is. Although Picard's recounting of Starfleet's first contact with the Klingons was interesting because I don't remember any other time when we hear a explanation of first contact between the Federation and the Klingons. Granted, in the case of first contact between the Federation and the Klingons, that was unavoidable because of the fact that the Klingons were expanding towards Federation space. Um, you know, it's not like the Federation showed up at the Klingon homeworld and then the Klingons built a space navy. No, 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 no. The Klingons already had a space navy. And like I noted earlier, the Klingon Empire, when they see minor races that are incapable of building their own space fleet, they see them as easy targets. They go, hey, we can use these guys as slave labor. We now one of the things that's interesting here is the way that they describe that they know Riker isn't a Malcorian says several things about Malcorian biology. Like one, I well, this doesn't say that his blood is wrong. I thought that there was a note that his blood was the wrong color too. Uh, I don't know. His heart is in the wrong place. Costal struts. I don't remember what those are. It's a bone, but I don't remember anything of that. And terminus. Terminus of what? Rib. Yeah. Okay. Short version. His rib cage is not the same shape as a Malcorian's. Oh, this is interesting. Malcorians w- use the word terminus for the foot. Okay. Malcorian feet don't have toes. Interesting way to make a alien race different from humans, I suppose. Again, the actors playing the parts still wear shoes, but they don't wear shoes that uh, let you see their feet to that degree. They just cover their feet. So that's actually a pretty easy thing to put in. Uh, anyway, though, so yeah, doing this in a TTRPG, that's something that's kind of interesting because of the fact that most of this is just talking. Like you could put in a bit of combat. It's like, oh no, you got discovered. They're trying to shoot at you. What are you gonna do? You could throw that in there, but the majority of the actual episode was actually just people diplomatically contemplating how things go. And in the case of Linnell, she was extra interested apparently. Uh, anyway, though, one of the things that's odd here, though, is that Riker actually does get injured in the episode, as noted, and that doesn't really go particularly well. Another of the interesting things here, though, is that you also have a scene with the various Malcorians trying to figure out what to do because one of the issues that the Malcorians have that affects the eventual decision to abandon the warp project is that the various Malcorian political interests have different reasons for wanting warp travel. Because, of course, the Malcorian political interests are looking out for themselves and trying to solidify their political power. Now, That is kind of, sort of, realpolitik version of things. And actually, you know what? I just something just occurred to me about Liddell. But it's like, see, the thing with the Malcorian politics, though, is that if you're writing this as a TTRPG, those would all be NPCs, unless you do a really, really weird one shot where some of the player, where you have the players play as Malcorians, and Riker is a GM insert character, and the Malcorians are having to figure out what to do about it. Not something I would throw in as part of a campaign, because you have players playing characters that, aren't something that they would normally be using. But as a one shot, that could work because you have the players playing pre-mades, I guess. Hmm. That would actually be a pretty fun perspective for a module, though. It's like playing the aliens while they're interacting with Starfleet for the first time. um, hmm. Now, that's the biggest issue with this particular episode, is that Riker does most of the interactions with the Malcorians alone. Now, you could rework it to have a group of people, but the plot of this episode would give you reason to want to have a relatively small group of people, and that said group of people would logically, you wouldn't necessarily have the entire um, group of players on Malcor. You could have part of them on Malcor and part of them playing the remote contact role, trying to covertly assist without actually going to Malcor. Like, oh, I need a tool to bypass this lock, and then the guy on the ship beams something down and tries to avoid getting noticed. Which, like I said, many times the big thing with episodes like this is deciding before you start how you want to address it. And this is an episode where the plot, due to its preemptive first contact, or precursor to first contact nature, there's several different angles you could look at it from. Like, maybe your party is going to decide they want to encourage the Malcorians to join the Federation by, helping them with the warp project. I mean, is that actually going to work out in such a simplistic manner? Not necessarily. It's entirely possible that the Malcorians would, instead of deciding they want to join the Federation, would take whatever technical assistance you give them and co-opt it for some other purpose. Why? Because it's possible that people that you negotiated with aren't the ones that are ultimately in charge. Because, maybe they get what you give them more or less gets stolen by a different political group, perhaps. There are so many uh different twists you could have for something like this. Other main thing, though, it's like you're not going to just write this as someone plays Picard and someone plays Riker, because, well, okay, I suppose in theory you could. It's just that most of the party would have very little to do, and then you have whoever plays Riker doing the majority of the stuff. Unless, of course, you actually do have some of the players actually play as Malcorians, but um, that would also kind of go with the whole like one shot thing, not a campaign thing. But again, like I said before, it's like multiple approaches. Like which style of approach you want to put to the episode affects how you choose what the players are going to have as their characters. It's like this is one of those episodes that focuses really, really heavily on the Malcorians, and having the GM play all of the Malcorians would be a lot of work for the GM. And this is one of those things that could go too far into the players watching the GM act out a movie rather than actually having the players play a game. And that is the one thing that I would caution you to avoid, is because you don't want the NPCs to completely take over the show. They're there for the players to interact with. They're not there to um, put on a stage performance while the players are the audience watching. Ah, and that is the basic gist of it. So it's a very simple episode. It's like, yes, there's a lot of plot that happens, but all of the plot is about the Malcorians and the Federation doing diplomatic negotiations of some sort, and there's not really a lot of layers to it. There's just multiple phases of discussion, not layers of plot. I don't know. Yeah, I think that's about it. And also, like, another thing is that if you're actually going to do this, depending on the time period that you're setting this in, if you're doing this TNG era, actually doing using the Malcorians is a viable option. If you're not doing it TNG area, maybe do a different alien race. There's lots of them. And one thing that would actually be rather amusing is doing this with some alien race that's actually known, but setting the mission before that race uh, was seen in the first episode where they were ostensibly introduced. Because one thing that's interesting in Star Trek is that there are a lot of alien species where the first time us, the viewers of the TV show, see them, the main character in the episode where they are being introduced to the audience is like, ah, yes, these people that the Federation has been trading with for decades. Like, oh, how did the Federation meet these people? I wonder. That is a fun idea. Adapting this particular style of mission and replacing the Malcorians with a race we actually know from an older episode. Hmm, that's a fun idea. But setting it before the episode in which we're actually introduced them. Like, one of the things with the Shellyak is that, the Federation had at one point fought a war with the Shellyak. We never see that on the show at all. We don't see any of the diplomatic negotiations that the Federation went through with the Shellyak in order to draft the treaty, or even first contact with the Shellyak. Nope. We see one interaction that Picard has with them, and the context of that interaction tells us volumes about who the Shellyak are, and gives us a summary of the Federation's past with the Shellyak. But we never see any of that. But that's just one example of dozens. The whole Alien of the Week thing in Star Trek. some of them are aliens that are new, both to the viewers and to the people in the show. Like, part of the reason why Riker got found out as an imposter is that the crew of the well, okay, let me rephrase that. Crusher is the one who disguised Riker as a Malcorian. Okay, and she did a simple uh, disguise because she didn't want to go to a whole lot of work that would need to be undone later. And she's like, well, we don't need to do this, this, and this, as long as you don't, get taken to a Malcorian medical facility and closely analyzed. Like, oh wait, no, that's exactly what happened to Riker. Oh well, yeah. Um, oh yeah, Linnell was actually a nurse. That's the one who was trying to seduce Riker. Okay, so he does actually sleep with her. That is actually an interesting plot point. Is that what if Riker did actually get her pregnant? Hmm. Okay, I hadn't thought of that before. Having that as the plot hook for a follow up. Oh boy. Because like one thing about this episode is that you could easily write a mission that's a follow up to the events of this one, where someone in Malcorian civilization made it public that this event happened because they found records. And those records, you know, the Malcorian people might have questions they want answered. Questions that could only be answered by delegates from the Federation. That that is an interesting idea for TTRPG. Why the what the Malcorians actually want, and so on and so forth. Oh, you could have loads of fun with that writing that. But there is only so much help I can give you with that because that is you making a new story. However, though, it's like looking over the whole thing with the Malcorians is that a lot of the Malcorians think that they need to expand into space or their race will stagnate and die. That logic as the impetus for this new push to meet the Federation or some other alien civilization. That that is something that you could have a lot of fun with as a TTRPG plot hook, because you know maybe this faction of Malcorians would be equally happy to talk to Romulans or Klingons. I mean, Picard said bad things about Klingons. Like, it's like first contact with the Klingons led the Federation to decades of war because the Klingons didn't want peace, and the Federation had to come up with some way to get the Klingons to make peace with them. Actually, realistically, the original peace treaty with the Federation was negotiated by the Organians, who used space magic to enforce it. Because the Klingons, up to that point, had no interest in peace. They didn't want peace because they wanted to conquer the Federation and annex all of Federation space. Why? Because they're Klingons, and that's what Klingons do. Anyway, though, looking at writing something like this from a perspective of what do the Malcorians want? Oh yeah, there is so far you could go with that, and that would be a whole lot of fun. Alrighty then. Well, I that's about as far as I can think of to go with this because again, it's like the episode is rather simple. Trying to like have players act out a plot that's similar to the episode's plot easily doable. The part that's interesting is when you get to the idea of what would a follow up be like. Writing a follow up, oh boy, that gets spicy. And of course, if you repurpose the plot of the episode to be some race that's not the Malcorians, you need to reevaluate all of the alien motives because the fact that the motives of the Malcorians are known, but if you replace them with a different alien, then you have to reevaluate. Like, okay, what does this alien want? Not necessarily the same thing as the Malcorians. And with that, I will see you guys later. Bye now.